No. Recording in progress. There we go.
The
Okay,
button was
so-
pressed.
I don't know how that happened, but yeah, I restarted. Now I'm gonna have to upload this in like 2 podcasts. Damn. I can
Part
splice them
one and
together.
part two.
Continue on, gentlemen. Maybe
Part one and
if
part
you're not
two.
one sec, if you're not going to continue to share the screen, because that's all anyone can see right now. Is
Oh,
just this picture.
sorry. Yeah.
So just
there you go.
yeah, just
there you go.
perfect.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
We just need to make the second half better than the first half. That way everybody won't even tune in to the first half. They'll just go right to the hardcore.
And it's actually a 1 minute warning. It's going to be 4:20 in Cape Verde in 1 minute, 47 seconds. So let's do a
Mark, just my last point on that, and we can move on, is that in the lab, they're doing that, maybe a nasty workup to get there, but is that compound then what they're doing the initial round of safety testing on? Like, we have this isolated drug that was made with all these fluorinated whatever. So safety is based on the nastiest, and then I'm sure they progress and they're doing continuous safety. So, but in theory, the drugs may even get safer than when they started because they were made with a cleaner process.
Ideally, the discovery compound is purified to absolute purity, 100% purity. So there is.
It doesn't matter. That's the point, right? I was trying to get to. So if you're going through that CBC made with that nasty process I just had shared, if was brought to purity, cost, who cares? Because maybe it's the elixir of life, right? And I'm a rich guy. Maybe I'm going to try CBC first and see if it lets me live forever. So I'm willing to spend whatever to get to an ultra pure. I don't care how nasty the process was.
Well, maybe you could run it through the wiper a bunch of times, clean it up enough, and then make a distillate and crash it out. Who knows? But I think the point is, and Marcus, we can move on after this. I hate to belabor this point, but I think the 4200 discussion, is more along the lines of, this is why we need it. It needs to be produced in a regulated environment because of all these potential things that could potentially happen. Is this guy right that he says, oh, my method works, but everybody else's method shits on everybody else, says that everybody else has got toxic shit, but his stuff, oh, it's really clean. We don't know, but if it's all manufactured in a regulated environment, it would be done so in a way where we would know what the right SOP is that makes something that's safe for human consumption. And hopefully they would have the right analytical techniques in there to know when a batch does not meet product specification and you got to throw it away. Right now, when a product doesn't meet product specification for vape, I think they put it into gummies. That's like the solution of, oh, I can't get this through a vape COA manufacturer because they're going to look at it and say, what's all this other crap in there? But you put it into some dark oil and put it into gummies or chocolates, and it's okay,
Dilution is the solution to pollution, my friend.
Yeah. Anyway.
What do you have to say about that, Mike West? You're being quiet over there. I feel like you got some things to say.
Yeah, I think ultimately a lot of the hemp processors had to look at, as they're processing and working up hemp, you are going to be trying to isolate them. In general, CBD. That CBD during the isolation, you're going to obviously pull off the other cannabinoids, which saw the increased valuation, but also saw the development of accumulation of THC that then had to get remediated. And people have looked at, obviously turning those other cannabinoids into potential revenue streams, right? So many of these hemp labs are trying to generate revenue streams in their own unique way, whether by isolating or remediating or converting those cannabinoids into other cannabinoids and formulating them into different products. And that's one of those things that can be done safely, but obviously I agree with Dr. Mark, needs to be done in a regulated environment, because we don't want products being sold at gas stations that haven't been produced and been COA, because there's obvious legal ramifications if somebody who, let's say we're producing it and it's a product that causes somebody who eats a gummy bear at a truck station to become intoxicated due to some side effect that could create liabilities for the gummy manufacturer or whatever product manufacturer. And those lawsuits have yet to happen. So this is kind of a precautionary tale that we don't want to see that come back and bite our industry in the ass and create these legal ramifications. And we're starting to see that there, with the development of CBC and Delta 8, it's a wonderful way that we can mitigate THC as well as, convert some of the CBD into new products. But obviously, if we try and distribute them freely instead of, say, distributing them in adult only venues, then it can create a unwanted attention that comes back and ends up generating negative publicity, which leads to negative regulatory environments, right? And there's been some states that have now passed bans on Delta 8, even though I would say that Delta 8 is probably a lower risk than the recreational THC that's found in Colorado. So
Mike, I was on a Zoom call the other night with a group of cannabis executives, both on the hemp and on the cannabis side. And the fellow who invited me on wanted me to kind of break down Delta 8. And one of the stories that was shared was an executive who, again, is well versed in the cannabis space and a longtime user and a CEO of a large cannabis company in California, and traveled to an area and bought some. Actually, no, what he told me was they went to the vaping expo, which is typically mostly nicotine products and device manufacturers and whatnot, people who work in those supply chains. And he said this year it was very different. He said it was 20% nicotine, 80% Delta 8. 80% of the people at the vaping thing were all Delta 8 hustlers or Delta 8 product manufacturers or whatever. So he brought back a couple products back on the plane to California with him, and he showed an energy shot that he said, yeah, he had, first class tickets, so he had a really comfortable seat and everything. Took a shot, and he said about 10 to 15 minutes later, he had an incredible feeling of wonderful euphoria like he'd never experienced with Delta 9. And being a longtime user, he's like, wow, this stuff's great. It's like, this is wonderful because it tastes good, So he took a few more sips of it. Well, he said about 10 minutes later, he started feeling a knot in his stomach. About 20 minutes later, he broke out into a cold sweat. And for the last 3 hours of that cross-country flight, he said it was the most miserable flight he'd ever been on before. He was incredibly high, had a feeling of anxiety and paranoia, and was just thinking, oh my God, this is sold at bodegas and gas stations to 16-year-old kids. And it gets you fucking loaded, dude. And it's probably chuck loaded with that iso-THC isomer, which we don't know what kind of impact that has on long-term and short-term health. And so you're absolutely right. This does need to be regulated because, and I think, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but some of the biggest markets for Delta 8 now are some of the most cannabis unfriendly states. There's the states that don't have a strong Delta 9 lobby. If you see like what's happened in Colorado and what I believe was happening in the other states is the Delta 9 lobby doesn't want Delta 8 at all, right? They want there's a certain level of rigor when it comes to Delta 9 production that's just not applied to Delta 8. So I hate to sit on a cannabinoid because I know it's safe and I know it's a good cannabinoid and I know it's good for those kids. But it's just so unfortunate that we're in this situation that's only been made possible through the ridiculousness of prohibition itself, that we're stuck in this current situation. I don't really know how it will resolve.
Yeah, when Canada passed the regulations for THC on the federal level, they made it actually not just THC, but the extraction of all cannabinoids. So if you're going to do any of the cannabinoids, CBD or THC, it all falls under the recreational processing licenses. You can separately get licensed for production or processing of hemp, but the minute you start extracting it, then you have to have the regulatory licenses. So ultimately that's one of the things that has yet to be addressed. Once you have the FDA involved, whether it be a food product or a drug product, topical or ingestible or inhalable otherwise, they're gonna have to implement some production regulatory environments, and that's in general going to require a requirement of COA, right? You're going to have to be able to have a COA, and that's going to be not only required by your insurance broker, but also by the Federal Regulatory Commission in the U.S. That's going to be the FDA, potentially the DEA or HEF, but it's one of those things that's regulated. If we're doing a caffeinated beverage, or a THC beverage, you got to make sure that beverage is not going to be poisoning your customers, because the regulatory requirements are going to make your insurance too expensive. Plus, bad press, poison your customers, you're going out of business, right? So it's one of those things in the unregulated industry, which, a lot of the hemp processors kind of fall in that legal gray area where they're operating with a state hemp license, but many of those state hemp licenses that regulatory framework doesn't cover all of the, not only the extraction, but chemosynthesis. So I think that as the Food and Drug Administration gets involved on a federal level, that you're going to start to see, CBD, THC, all the isomerization, acetylcholine, and other, chemosynthetic conversions require safety trials before they go to a commercial market. And that's something that can be done at universities here in Canada, but when we were trying to do them down in the States, we ended up having to look at doing those product trials abroad, because doing research at universities is difficult with the night of monopoly. We hope that with this news a couple weeks ago, that's going to open up the door, because we'll actually, some of the licensed producers will be able to actually work and develop genetics that are formulated. We can extract and formulate them and prepare them, but it's a long time coming, and we don't want to hold our breath we don't want to tell the patients to hold their breath to be able to formulate these products for them. So until the federal regulatory framework comes out, we kind of need to use these forums, peer review and peer self-regulate, and use that self-regulation to create a better industry that can set an example, so that we can educate the regulators on what needs to be included. I'm actually quite appalled that there's still states, some of the licensed states that allow recreational still don't require pesticide testing. Some of them did, and there's been ebbs and flows. Washington had an outright ban on aerobic bacteria, which was really bad for the organic farmers. And then a couple of years after regulation on the recreational level, they allowed some bacteria, but they just required you to test for the mycotoxins. So I think, and then other places, Oregon's always had a fairly strict pesticide thing, but I don't think Oregon required heavy metals in the first round, heavy metal testing. And then some of the other states, California's kind of had more progressive. They started fairly loose in the medical scene, and as its transition to recreational, testing's gotten a lot stricter. So I think each of those states are acting as laboratories of democracy, and I have no doubt the feds are paying attention to seeing what's happening in each of those states and working on a federal level to figure out how they're going to create those regulations. But
yes, to everything you said.
Yes. So and ultimately, Mark, because it is chemosynthesis, right? It's not just extraction.
Well, the conversion. Well, it's interesting because Dustin started talking about just basically the isomerization of delta 8, And so, or I'm sorry, the isomerization of delta 9, right? So just starting with extract and distilling it down to a crude, and now you have delta 9. Well, now all I'm going to do is throw a little bit of dirt, i.e. clay, at this, which is just bentonite clay. That's what these acidic clays are. You know, if you push a roller coaster down a hill, it goes down the hill and it doesn't come back. So that's the thing with delta 9. And so I think that way of making delta 8 and enriching a distillate sample with delta 8 is inherently more safer than a chemical conversion of CBD isolate through delta 8 or to delta 8. I don't know if I just confused everyone. So converting delta 9 into delta 8, I think is safer than converting CBD into delta 8. Does that make sense, Dustin?
Just like a full spectrum,
Dustin, you're muted.
Let's say a CBC hash that's organically grown hash. If it's grown organically and it's a cultivar that naturally expresses those cannabinoids and terpenes, it would be preferable to process them, naturally, right? As opposed to having to worry about, taking another cannabinoid to go through the dirty chemistry, which can be cleaned up, but then you have waste products, and we
right,
as environmentalists want to minimize those waste products. So,
right, it's no longer an extract. And I guess, again, on the other side, I'll say, well, I'm just going to take an extract and throw something natural like clay, which is acidic, not realizing that also cleaning up the color is converting this extract. I guess that's better because you can't form the other iso-THC that way because the THC ring structure is already formed, I guess. So I'm inherently just thinking that that's a safer way. So if you have to make delta 8, have a delta 9 license.
Delta 8 with no presence of anything other than just the crude, and it was just like a
just heat,
kind of a
heat,
heat and whatever
so
came off the
heat
plant
was basically the wheels of the roller coaster going down the hill. You can use acid. So what acid does is acid makes the hill that the roller coaster goes down smaller. Acid lowers the activation energy in between delta 8 and delta 9. But what you're doing with heat is you're just pushing it down the hill. In fact, you got to remember, you did that in glassware, right, Dustin?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Glassware is acidic. Glassware, essentially, in and of itself, is silicic acid, right? So silicic acid is an acid, right? So glassware itself could catalyze this reaction.
Mark, you shared a paper with me that was basically just heat turning CBD into all sorts of crazy different cannabinoids, right? And just through heat alone. So if I'm smoking a bowl in a glass pipe, I'm getting all sorts of cannabinoid conversions just from the heat right there into my lungs.
You could, yeah. I mean, yeah, absolutely. There's a guy out there, Marcus Rogan. I didn't see his talk, but he gave a talk last week or a couple of weeks ago about he's doing some aerosolization studies, or I don't know if he's got the joint smoking machine or
is that at UBC?
Yeah, that guy.
Right. Yeah.
So he's doing, Marcus, what he claims is that the THC never vaporizes and never reaches its boiling point, and that it's some aerosol formation of liquid THC in weed smoke. So I don't know. I mean, the other interesting aspect about it is he said that, he's like, what is, joint smoke is not hot enough to vaporize THC. And it's like, wait a second, are you talking about the actual hots of the joint? That's thousands of degrees, man.
That's Marcus Rogan, right? Dr. Marcus Rogan.
Right, that guy.
Yeah, you know what? It just I was like, this sounds really familiar. So I went into my phone and my emails, and I reached out to him on February 27th. He got back to me, and I guess
Yeah.
I just sort of spaced he got back to me twice. So now I'm gonna have to send him back an email.
He'd be an interesting guy to
apologetic
get on
there.
church. I know him, truth be told, but I think some of his ideas are a little flaky at best, and just they're not always scientifically grounded. So it would make for a very interesting, lively hash church discussion with Dr.
Well, now
Rogan.
you called him out, so
Yeah, I know he's gonna kill me now. Right? No, but I'm just saying, to come up with this concept that you're not actually vaporizing THC, it's like, well, okay, then how does my dab rig work? Tell me exactly. I'm creating some kind of aerosol that jets through the water. I don't know. It just doesn't sound grounded to me.
Hey, I want to welcome best friend in the house and Dragonfly Earth Medicine. Welcome, guys.
Hey there.
What's going on, dude?
Hey, Josh and Kelly, how are you?
Farming.
Just farming. I feel like that's what you guys are up to. Farming. That's what farmers do. Is that what the Dragonfly Earth Medicine farm crew has been up to as well? You look frozen. Maybe I'm frozen.
Yeah.
Everyone else is moving.
no, you're not frozen.
Getting everything dialed in and
Not much downtime.
and watered and hopefully our internet good enough.
I
didn't
challenge
even realize
the Solo Cup Grow.
I can hear you now. I can hear you now. You were frozen and I couldn't hear you, and then I suddenly heard you while I was okay. Yes, I think you're coming through better now. Let's give that a shot.
I'm not sure if it's working, but it's like a psychedelic experience to see if you're like hearing us or if we're talking, and it's like glitchy. It's like, oh shit, and then you're on time and you're off time. It's like, fuck, you know. But big love and respect to everyone here today, and we appreciate the conversation.
Yeah, and just wanted to say, in response to what you were saying, Marcus, we do feel like, these conversations are incredibly important. We do feel like all facets of the wheel need to be discussed in order to understand how it rolls evenly and equally. It's like the Dharma wheel. If all the spokes on the Dharma wheel are not taut perfectly, then the wheel doesn't roll properly. And all of these conversations are all part of the spokes of the wheel into us finding our ultimate health and our ultimate placement on this earth right now. And how are we going to move forward this plant? And I think that all of these conversations are incredibly important. And we're always gonna uphold the spoke in the wheel that is the full spectrum, that is the fully regenerative, because that's our expertise and that's what we uphold. But we want to say how much we respect and admire this conversation and the deep science that goes into it, because it is important to have all of the colors of the rainbow involved.
That's why we're humans, because we're all part of the rainbow.
Nice. I like it. Humans. I like it.
Olfactory views.
Can we talk about the trees real quick? We were about you mentioned you guys are having some issue up there with your old growth, and that maybe Dragonfly was involved as well.
Yep, I think they'd be great
We're not
to share.
directly involved. We're just very active nature beings. We live in a mountain region, and we are actively protecting the old growth in our area as well. But Fairy Creek on Vancouver Island and the Fairy Creek blockade is now the longest standing blockade in Canadian history. There's been at least 175 people arrested in the last, say, 3 weeks. It's an amazing standoff in the woods. And we've been supporting it in every single way that we can. There's been marches all over British Columbia, even in New York, different places in the world in solidarity to Fairy Creek.
And we're trying to really follow the lead of the Indigenous nations. This is their land. This is, so we're really talking to them directly at Fairy Creek, the elders and the chiefs that own the land outright are trying to be in communication with the federal government as well as the provincial government. They're not really getting anywhere. So we are trying to help disseminate out the information in a proper way by getting it from the Indigenous nations and following their lead. They are the ones who've been up there for the 175 days.
They've been up there since August. So this is a 10-month blockade all through the winter. And then the Canadian government released an injunction that allowed Teal Jones Group to go in and log the last old growth watershed valley on southern Vancouver Island. And as Marcus said before, there's only 2.7% old
and
growth.
I want to be really clear with everybody that these old growths are really massive yellow old growth cedars. They will not be using these old growths for really anything other than paper or some kind of a fiber board or toilet paper, because it's not a hard wood. So what the ultimate reality is in logging old growth forest is that they want to be able to have the land so that they can replant it with the fir and the single species so that they can turn it into a higher commodity piece. If they replant it, then it's worth more money than the old growth standing.
So I'll just build on that by saying the yellow cedar is different subspecies of the cedar. Most of the cedar you see on the West Coast around you, Dustin, a lot of it's done. There's Port Orford cedar in Oregon, very rare, very awesome from Port Orford, Oregon. The yellow cedar has a magnificent incense flavor and a magnificent flavor. The natives use this cedar to create coast up. In some cases, there's stories of them going all through Polynesia. Back in the day, the Haida Gwaii natives. Currently, we're on the Sinixt Nation, and the Sinixt Nation in the Kootenays has been called extinct, but they are now winning court battles to prove that they have a place here, that they have a language, that they have.
That was just lifted last month.
Yeah, recently they had just become legitimized again as a native indigenous nation. We're also near the Tanaha Nation, and they helped save Jumbo Pass. Keep Jumbo Wild was a very important environmentalist mission. So there's also the Trans-Canada Pipeline, and there's a tremendous amount of energy in the Native and Indigenous First Nations community to stop the pipeline. And people can look up the Tiny House Warriors and the Braided Warriors and so many other people that are on the front lines in central and northern British Columbia to stop the pipeline.
And we're just really getting out very, very little information to you all. We really highly recommend that everybody go directly to the Fairy Creek Blockade, which is on Instagram.
Trans-Canada Pipeline.
Or Trans-Canada Pipeline.
And the Wet'suwet'en checkout. I may have said that wrong.
So that you can learn directly from these people, so you can get the proper education, so that we're not saying the improper things, which is just so incredibly important. Also, there's been terrible. I have to take a second here, actually, because just last week in Kamloops, there was 215 bodies found buried underneath the school.
The residential school in Kamloops.
For the residential school for the Indigenous nations.
The last residential school closed in 1998. Residential schools was an amazing, horrific schooling operation that tried to break the Native connection to Earth, to break the First Nations connection, to disassociate them completely from everything that they were about.
To take the Native out of the human was the goal of these residential schools. And now we have the capability to 3 years old. So if that isn't a call to all of humanity to support all of us, then I do not know what is. If we are not waking up and recognizing not figured out yet that this is the demise of humanity that separates us, that causes us to find problems in all different people, no matter what color they are, no matter what race they are, no matter what religion, no matter what socioeconomic, no matter where they live, no matter how they feel or think. It's time now for us to react. It's time now for us to make a difference. All of this needs to be done.
It's also
over with.
Really important to look up missing and murdered Indigenous women in Northern British Columbia, just to finalize the respect for the oppression that's been happening against the First Nations people there. Please look up missing and murdered Indigenous women in Northern British Columbia. And if you feel called, put it out. Look at our story every single day. Put it out, contact people every single day right now. I call as many people as I can in all facets of life to bring awareness to certain situations, including cannabis, including farming, including food security, medicine security, living security. The time is now. It's a pandemic. We've been locked down. We're fired up. We're ready to roll. And we got gardens to support us. We got spring water to support us. We have animals, everything we need. And now we need to rise up out of the rhizosphere, out of the soil, become empowered human beings, and now make change through our actions.
And we need to use our white privilege to support brown people on the planet right now. This is absolute imperative. This is what side you stand on. People are being hurt. People are being harmed, all in the name of big corporate nature and big corporations. And I wanted to say sorry, not sorry for bringing such a heavy load onto Hash Church, but we're all feeling it right now. Our DM is being blown up. People are losing it. Left, right, and center. We need to come back to center. We need to come back to source. We need to come back to love. We need to come back to happiness. Fear has no place in our future togetherness and our future health and well-being. It has no place.
And Dustin's been talking a lot about the extractions and stuff, but also he's an amazing regenerative cow farmer. And that's another thing that's on the chopping block in Oregon, to get rid of meat and animal husbandry altogether and create fake meat as a claim towards climate change. And we don't agree with that. What we agree with keeping nature systems alive, because we are nature, as we said in the chat, because we are nature, we think it's important to uphold nature cycles. So thank you, Dustin, for that work and everything else in the chain. Big love to the family. Big up. Let's make this happen. We're the change we're looking for. Without us and other people like us and the crew, shit's going away. We got to keep it alive.
We just appreciate everybody out there in the chat. Like, what an amazing crew of cannabis culture again, over and over again. I heard some negativity, but always positive, and people have been hitting us up in the DM and checking in with us, and we're checking in with other people, family. We just want to tell you that no matter what is going on in the world, and no matter what kind of walls people are feeling and come in on them right now, the magic is still there. It's bigger and it's brighter than ever, and there's more and more and people that are awakening to letting go of fear and taking on love.
Thank you guys for coming in and sharing that. That was indeed heavy, but it needs to be talked about and mentioned, and everything you guys said was super on point. It was, I hate to, bring it even heavier, but that 215 is literally the tiniest tip of the iceberg that is the genocide of the indigenous population, which just seems to be, like you said, it's the war on nature, right? Like they speak for the trees. Truly, if the Lorax was ever based on anything, it would be the indigenous people. And so it kind of makes sense that whatever this is that just decides that it needs to destroy nature, the nature destroyer, it seems like the indigenous people are, and have been
Racism, is it?
embattled in that. I mean, I think it's
Is it
partially
is it
racism, but
racism?
it seems to
Like
be even heavier.
culturalism.
It depends on how deep the rabbit hole you go. Okay. And I get where you're coming from, Dr. Mark, you're probably racism for sure. But if you go like deeper down the rabbit hole, I think it's like good versus evil. Like it's just like that oldest energy. And the weird thing is, and I was talking about this with my wife the other day, that life itself is tension, and it's tension between birth and death. And that tension is held your whole life, and we all feel that tension. And that kind of seems to be the value that is life. And that you can't ever, because my wife was like, oh, there's just so much evil in the world. And I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's balanced. I think there can only be a certain amount of that and a certain amount of this. And then there's the tension between the two. And depending on where you navigate in that tension, shit can get heavier, shit can get a little lighter. Oh, you're muted, but I want to hear what you're saying, Josh. You're muted.
Also, if you go down the rabbit hole with racism, you find out we all came from Africa.
Yeah, exactly.
It's really that simple.
Yeah. Well, it is really that simple, but for people who are blinded by ignorance and anger and hate, kind of like, going back to that sort of good versus evil again, if you're tapping into that energy, you're, what's just happened there, Josh? I'm watching the YouTube video and you're talking, but it's delayed. And so I'm thinking, oh, dude, what I want to hear from you, Josh. What were you saying? Oh, shit. I'm mildly
Stoner party of one. Stoner party of one.
Exactly. Hey, it's nice. It's nice to be baked. It's nice to be hanging out with all of you guys and chilling on a Sunday.
I think it's time to probably take a smoke and have a dab
and light some sage and clear the air, some incense in Asia, some sage and a cedar bough. Lavender is often in a smudge stick. So, Best Friend Farm's big enough over there. Some Tulsi, those kind of things are important. Some cherry pie could be really nice.
And I really support this brand. It's Echo Electuary down in Oregon. This one's one of their single source, but they do a lot of partner stuff. But he does the best job I've ever come across of getting the profile of a plant into an extract using a hydrocarbon. It's incredible.
They're great guys. They know what they're doing. Definitely.
Yeah, and they support, it's 3 to the B. So 3% of their profits go directly back into bee conservatories. They have all their own on-site apiaries where their grows are. They practice regenerative agriculture. Great people.
3 to the B. I like that. Someone was go ahead.
Well, we have a thing to share, and it has to do with Nick Risden, and anyone who doesn't know who Nick Risden is can look him up online on Instagram. Lime Rising Farms. Nick Risden, amazing person. He's been through Lyme's disease. Is his one of his battles. It's led to many different things.
Well, it's Lyme's disease with multiple different bacterial infections from the tick bite, and he has just gone in for some accumulative
therapy.
Some not necessarily therapy, but they're looking at his brain. They're going in for testing to try to put him into. And I really want Nick to come on, and he will another time. So a lot of this I'm paraphrasing. He's going to have much better words. He's going to tell us exactly what's going on. So I'm just sort of giving a rough overview. He went in, they wanted to see what kind of things they could throw at him to instill a seizure to
Yeah.
see.
He can get up to 300 seizures a day, or you know.
And to look at those seizures on an EKG machine, and they had him, you know, hooked up everywhere on a brainwave machine as well. And
here's what they found.
So this first picture he just shared with us this morning is them trying to, he goes into grand mal seizure, and they're trying to stop the seizures with every kind of drug anti-seizure that they have.
These are his brain waves.
Even they tried to give him a some beers, which he knew wasn't FDA approved or anything. They threw everything at him, you know, all of the Adderalls. Now
we don't have any more,
which they had taken away all of his medicines because they wanted to throw all of their medicines at it. He was allowed to take the Mycocana caps, which is what we make, which is just a blend of mushrooms and CBD,
mushrooms
full
from
spectrum.
from old growth forests. Again, they're mushrooms from old growth forests,
yeah,
mixed with hemp, grown regeneratively,
and
whole
a
spectrum.
bunch of different adaptogenic herbs, compounded adaptogenic intelligent herbs. So he took 12 caps, a big dose, and then 45 minutes later, his
almost
brain
straight lined,
is complete
and
normalized.
total, yeah,
completely
balanced, calmed, and they were amazed. And it was amazing to just
on to the incredibly intelligent conversation that you all were having before, is that when we're dealing with these adaptogenic secondary metabolites, you know, they change. Not only do they change in the making of them, but they change in the uptake of them and the response of them as well. So it's sort of hard to calculate this stuff, but here we are being given a really awesome representation
of the power of natural medicine and herbalism.
You know, and a person who's putting both of these things together really beautifully right now in a book that I'm listening to, and it made me kind of want to reach out to him and maybe invite him onto Hash Church, is Rupert Sheldrake's son, Merlin Sheldrake, who wrote a book called Entangled Life. And it is really worth checking out. I think it's like a $20 book or something, $18, or you can just get it on Audible and listen to it. And it is Merlin in his voice, sort of reading the book, which I find really wonderful. It just kind of is tying in a lot of what we're talking about right now. It gets into the sensory science. He's talking a lot about the mycorrhizae. He's been, you know, he went to school at Cambridge and basically studied a whole variety of different sort of synergies between plants, and learning about bacteria and viruses and how they can like transfer their DNA to one another horizontally, and bacteria can take just a really super unique and awesome conversation, but a lot about the mushroom, a lot about the mycorrhizae. And yeah, if you guys haven't heard of Merlin or you haven't checked out his book, check it out.
Dr. James White, who studies the rhizophagy cycle and endophytic and endophytic bacteria and fungi in plants. Plants have mycorrhizal fungi attached to their roots mostly. At the tip of the roots, you have the rhizophagy cycle, which is where the root transforms the nutrient and the trace minerals and brings it into the plant. Now, often in soils, there's pathogens all around the soil. Paul Stamets always talks about how can a one-celled or a single-walled organism live in soil with trillions of pathogens potentially killing it. It's because of its microbiome. It's because of its biome and its capability at the tip of the root and the rhizophagy cycle to pull through things that are only beneficial to the plant. It's a cycle that the body does with the microbiome. When our biome is healthy, we uptake what's healthy for us. Just like the plants in the plant root zone, it's going to suck up what he's tested is all the endophytic fungi and bacteria that enters the plants through the soil are all beneficial. None of them are pathogenic. The plant's not sucked. It could get attacked from the outside. It could get attacked because obviously plants have issues. But what its magic is, and bringing in chloroplasts and plant blood is going to be a beneficial reaction. And so we want to create medicine that enhances that process, because that process is what makes us humus beings and from the earth. It's what gives us our ultimate protection. Everything else is actually throwing it off. You know, the chemicals in the water, the different chemicals, the toxic, everything, it's throwing off our magic. Our magic is so powerful that there's medicine and foods and water and everything trying to take it down. But when you take it away and you become strong, it's unbelievable what happens.
It's all in the tension. Trust me. It's all in the tension. You can't have one without the other. You just can't. It's where we come from and it's where we go. And I'm sure it's why we get trapped in that sort of same sort of, we just have, and it's just our human nature. I think the whole part of being here is to divide and to become more like, no, I don't want to be a part of that. I want to be a part of this. You know, when you come from everything and go to everything, kind of fractioning out and being like your own sort of individual self and finding your tribe is kind of what it's all about while you're here. But I promise you, whatever your tribe is, you're going back to everything. That's just the way it is.
And it's hard to fit all of that, you know, into a body. So just that alone is just so complex.
Thanks for cannabis.
I'm thankful for it every day because of that. It's hard to be in the body without cannabis.
Hey, Dragonfly guys, have you played around with Koji at all?
Absolutely. And working with Koji?
Yeah, absolutely. Have you tried catching Koji? Like catching an Aspergillus strain?
No, we haven't caught anything, or and defined it, or captured the DNA of it as Koji. We've ordered Koji and done all different kinds of grow out of it and different types of bean strains, and even adding greens and adding kombu, and going down the rabbit holes of seaweed and its interaction with it and the pH.
And seaweed
really
and
exciting,
and taking away the gases. And
why do you ask?
I just finished Koji Alchemy, and I've been talking a lot with a guy on Instagram, TM Gastronaut. Super great people. And so I started playing around with like miso marinating my steaks, which is cool, but the miso, it's not active. So I ordered the Aspergillus starter. My goal is to make it easier to incorporate specifically liver is what I'm after. And liver doesn't taste, beef liver is not the best tasting thing in my opinion. So getting it to a usable state without just using a massive amount of like bacon fat, basically. And I was talking to him about it and I said, how does it do with liver pate? And he said, it's excellent because it imparts that sweet, nutty flavor. And because it's blended, it becomes like an amino paste. So you're basically making like a miso, but to have a different name out of a liver paste. And for the rest of you guys, if you don't know about Koji, it's a mold type fungus, and it's like a microfilamentous fungus, and it sends its filaments down into whatever it's on and puts out exudates that convert the proteins, carbohydrates into sugars, which then the plant, in a symbiotic relationship, that's that function they were talking about earlier, where the mushroom makes this and the plant sucks it up and it gives up little parts to the mushroom, and they got this little relationship going on, provide for each other. This one kind of is like a decomposer. So steaks or chunks of meat like that, or you can blend it up. And so when you blend it up, it's much easier for the microfilamentous to get down because you've got it all mixed in the solution. So it can turn this beefy tasting liver paste, which sounds terrible and tastes kind of terrible, into something magical.
Does it tenderize the meat at all? Does it tenderize it?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you do it on a steak,
right?
Absolutely. And then if you do like a reverse, this is what I did with the miso paste is marinated it for like 24 hours in a miso soy white wine mix, and then did a reverse sear. So brought the steak up to like 110 and then seared it on a really hot iron skillet, like a cast iron skillet. And the Maillard reaction with the miso paste was excellent. So, like the chart out, the black and blue, it was primo. And, like they mentioned earlier, these are from my, like holistically managed cattle that we raise just up the street on some pasture that we lease. Yeah, and that system's working out great. They've never been fed anything. They drink water off the property. They just, the better we do, the better the grass grows. And now we have multiple years of soil test data to prove that we are sequestering a significant amount of carbon through these animals. And we also own a bunch of land up on the hill and practice broad scale permaculture in various systems. The only animal that's ever died at the cow pastures, other than maybe a snake got stepped on once by a cow, are the cows themselves. Everything out, the elk love it there, the deer love it there. We have beavers creating dams. I got snakes, I got birds, I got everything. I love all of it. Nothing there has ever died. I've never killed a single slug. On our permaculture farm, trying to grow greens and to be fair, we're in the forest, right? In the middle of the forest trying to grow some annual crops, and it is just slug genocide up there. It's a constant battle with these things. Who's going to get more of it? So, when I look at cattle farming or and one step better is this permaculture system that we're developing is with the intent that it provides such a bountiful production for the native wildlife that I could just not have to do cows anymore. And the elk, I'd much rather just get a couple elk and eat that throughout the year. I don't have to manage them the rest of the time. So if I can provide a system that makes an abundance of elk, that's a much better situation. So that's our long-term goal. But to convert, a patch of forest into a food forest in the middle of basically food desert, an industrial forest, like the whole thing's monocrop for timber production, like they're talking. That's all of Southwest Washington. Like 98% of the land down here is owned by timber companies. So I plot myself in the middle so that when hemp destroys the timber industry, I'll be primely set up to expand my permaculture throughout all this, what will become a liability. Like, what do you do with a bunch of trees when what's really interesting right now? I can buy hemp plywood for about half the price of like timber-based plywood. Wow. It's kind of fun.
Wow. Do you get that online or at a local building store?
Yeah, it's online. Let me dig it up. Someone sent it to me just the other day. I'll pull it up and see.
Plywood's like tripled and quadrupled.
Out of control.
We're working with the hemp that we brought last time we were on here, and we weighed out 12 seeds and to a gram, and it's those kinds of hemps that are so huge that we feel can make a difference in the timber industry. So we're working with Implanta and Daryl Hudson out of the University of Saskatchewan and helping develop those food and fiber strains that will make a difference, and it can replace the pellet farms and all of the toilet paper, all those things so much. Everyone knows it,
and it can offer like no problems to the entire cannabis industry because he's not ever seen them flower. Like they've never flowered out before. They just keep growing and growing and growing and growing. So they create beautiful cellulose, beautiful silicates, and
minimal flower,
great fiber, and no flower.
Look at this 3/4 inch thick board, $60. That's, how much that's like at least $75-$80 at the store right now, maybe even more. Even the 1/2 inch.
What glue are they using,
Isocyanate.
Your Gorilla Glue.
Yeah, I'm not sure. So,
I think they're using 6-star bubble hash actually as their glue. It's like a 6-to-1 ratio or something.
Plywood's never been, a thing that was biodegradable. So I wouldn't necessarily expect that of hemp board, but it's still like, wow.
It can't possibly be as toxic and as much of a bummer as the other stuff.
Can these things be, so boarding and decking is one thing. And if it could be used as cladding, it's different. But can it actually be used as the undercarriage lumber underneath a deck? I mean, yeah, okay, decking, yes. But I don't think it could actually be used for like in place of like 2x10s and
It's
by
not
eight.
treated. It's not treated, Mark.
Right,
So
it's not treated, so it's not.
Okay,
gonna
so
have any.
what I just showed you is plywood, and yes, it's structural. You could use it as sheeting on a building, and that's what, you know, plywood, or you could use it as subfloor above those joists that you're talking about. If I was gonna, yes, you could 100% make structural pieces out of it. It would be in an I-beam configuration. So I'm building a house right now, and the traditional lumber, the long stretches are plywood going this way, plywood going this way in an I-beam shape, and it's just as strong and significantly lighter than the alternative current wood beam. If I had old growth, that's a whole different story, much tighter grain, yada yada. But when we're talking about like the future of building and we're going to use hemp, it's going to be composite pieces like this, and you get a lot of structure just by changing it. And the real beauty, where this stuff isn't quite at yet but will be, and when they said they've got huge hemp plants, what we really want is 20-foot tall field grown like corn, basically, because those long fibers are where the strength's at. Because if I take a bunch of very long fibers, press and glue them together, I get exponentially more strength than a bunch of particle board pieces.
Yeah, they can start even putting shorter fiber into oriented strand boards. So oriented strand board is all the wood chips off the bottom of the sawmill, and what they do is they press those together into a laminate and glue it. And so the glue turns out to be the magic. I mean, yeah, there's lots of cheap sources of cellulose, and how to orient those fibers to get the real strength, the modular strength of the fibers themselves is definitely a trick. But I think this could certainly be used. The question I have, I mean, even for outdoor cladding though, Dustin, it would have to be, again, the biggest thing outdoors is ultraviolet light. So ultraviolet light will degrade lignin. So if you just put a piece of untreated wood out in the weather, after about a year, it turns gray. After about 2 or 3 years, it'll fall apart because all you have is cellulose. You've completely degraded all of the lignin. So the real question is how stable is the matrix that holds all that together? And that'll be where some innovation needs to happen.
Sure, and the same issue with plywood, and then if that's going to be an issue, if I've got wood that's going to be outside, then I treat it, right, with some usually pretty toxic chemicals.
Nasty chemicals, yeah.
Right. No, yeah, but in nature, I just do a better job of material selection. Like my cedar that's going to be exposed outside is fine because it can go 100 years underground.
Or wood that's naturally resistant to degradation. That's right.
And if I needed to go even further, I'll char the end of it before I stick it into the ground. And now it's going to last at least 2 lifetimes. Like we're good.
So a product called Lifetime. Sorry, Dustin, if you wanted to finish up something. As far as the siding or cladding, as Mark said, you can use a product called Lifetime. It's made up here in the Kootenays, but they send it all over the world. The guys with the European family and a European coveted recipe or something, but it's powder, and you put it in 5 gallons of water, and really it smells like rust water. It's like I forget dioxide what the main component is in it, but they don't tell you what's in it. But what you do is you put it in a 5-gallon bucket or bigger, and you use a paint sprayer and spray it on natural wood, and it's like they say an herbal fungal mineral mix. And it kind of darkens the wood a little bit, turns it a little bit green, but it's a totally natural finish that you can spray on super easy, almost just like water out of a paint sprayer. And we just used it on our last timber frame structure, and I like it. And then we did the shoji ban,
charring,
the charring. So we did that for board and battens. So we did 1x8 and then did a batten that was charred. So it's kind of this interesting look of black striped and building. Dark. Yeah. But it's natural and that part.
Yeah.
Cool.
Also, there's great milk based paints out there. Do
you guys have a mill? A sawmill?
We have 3 neighbors that have sawmills, so we don't have one at the moment. But I like the idea of getting an Alaskan chain mill, only for the rawness part of it. I don't see it as a great building material tool, but it's also like we make mountain biking jumps and greenhouses and all kinds of sort of landscaping style building, and that works really good for us. But we have really amazing mills near us, so we do salvage wood out of clear cuts and on the sides of roads and definitely
and out of our lake for sure.
Milled up. Yeah, the lake is a big source for us for full trees and things.
I imagine you have like, do you use wood burning heat in the winter on site? Yeah, so you have some managed timber production, and in that sense, you're probably coppicing, pollarding, whatever your source is, right?
And we just gather it because we live literally on the side of the largest wilderness area in southern British Columbia. So raw materials are not a thing for us. It's not a
get it from your zone 4 on the outside
situation. You can get it really easily.
We just get dead timbers that are already down.
We do.
And we make sure to leave it. And we're really conscious about how much wood we burn as well.
We have spruce, hemlock, fir, cedar, pine, and.
Do you guys have any rocket mass setups? Any rocket mass stove or heater or anything?
Not right now, but I have 2 greenhouses. My Wally Peony and the round one, which we call the mothership, is something I really want to build a rocket mass, more of an earth-fired stove, which will have water going through the beds. And then I also put a 300-gallon septic tank in the center of the greenhouse in the ground. So once the water starts flowing through, it can go into a holding tank in the center of the greenhouse. And there's also air tubes, 4-inch air tubes going 1,000 feet in the ground, 6 feet under, and then coming up in the center. So I like the idea of doing somewhat passive geothermal.
Yeah, big thermal battery, pretty much. The air tubes, are you catching all the hot air from the peak of it and then sucking it down into the ground?
The peak of it, I have just sandwiched 2 layers of plastic in between a full 2x4, full 2 dimensions. And I'm gonna put 4 air tubes going down like north, south, east, and west and gather the hot air from the top and then put it into the roof at the bottom because the snow accumulates near the base. I get any heat from any of the sun, I'll be able to gather it at the hot end and then sort of force it through like forced air to make a little bit more of the bubble.
Sweet.
And we're on homestead time and we don't hire out work. So everything is magical and has its divine timing. And this lockdown has been very good for us working on our farm.
And we always laugh about how really and truly like being somebody that can't focus or being 2 people that can't focus on one thing for very long, whatever you want to call it,
ADD, whatever.
It
works good for us.
It works great for farming, just in case. So
what cannabinoid is that again?
Exactly.
Exactly. I like terpinolene.
That's a terpene, not a cannabinoid.
I know, that's why I said that.
But I like it too.
And what's best friend? What have you been planting on your farm in the last week, or what? Well, can you tell us what you've done in the last? Oh, and Dustin, do you use ducks for your slugs? Because ducks and cows get along really good.
They love
ducks
each other.
are really easy on the garden. They can go all over.
And if you let the cows raise the baby ducks, then they'll protect them from any predators in wherever you're grazing. No.
We've had lots of ducks. We have no ducks now. I only ate maybe one of them, and the rest we feed the wildlife. It's very difficult where we are. Like I said, I'm like Mecca in the middle of the desert. There's nothing to eat anywhere until you show up at my spot, and then there's everything to eat. Doesn't matter who we are, big, small, eat plants, eat animals. Here you go. Got a dog, doesn't do shit. Like we lease a bunch of land down in like the flats of a slough about 10 minutes from here, and that's where we raise our cattle. So they're not yet integrated up, and I don't think I'm gonna integrate cattle up into the hill farm. It's just I just don't have enough. I might bring some of my small Dexter, but I think we'll probably do sheep, like the haired shedding sheep. and then we're in the process of fencing it, you know, with elk fencing to try and get established with these trees. Because when you've got multiple thousand trees in the ground, it's a lot cheaper just to fence the whole thing than to try to fence each one. So that's where we're at with that right now. We will move back into fully integrated, and we've ran a lot of chickens with the cows just to control flies. Was great, but I've seen eagles eat my chickens. I've seen little like marmots eat my chickens. I've seen cats eat my chickens. It's endless. Same with the ducks. So
everybody loves those chickens.
They're sitting ducks, man. But yes, they did great for the slugs. It was an awesome solution. We'll get back to it when we can figure out how to keep them.
I just want to say that Tony Neg gave a beautiful, he calls it CBHD. So that's the new term. It's CBHD. And then what else? I wanted to say one other thing that, Aru GIF said, please say hello to me. It would make my day. Well, if that's not the easiest way to make someone's day, let's all say hi to Aru GIF in the chat room.
Hey, what up? Aru.
Yeah, blessed love.
Smoke them if you got them.
Smoke them if you want it. Got them. Exactly. Sorry to interrupt there, guys, but I had
going
to.
on the farm.
I think.
Let's hear from Farmer.
Yeah, exactly. That's
hey, Dustin. Dustin, have you considered using raised beds with rocks, like right dead center in your cutout for those greens, with like a rock fringe, even crushed rock around the rock raised bed for like just a really central rock raised bed, which would pick it up off the ground for those slugs, and then like any rock sand border, probably shardy kind of rock situation might help a lot. They lay off my beds that are right in the middle of the yard for sure and hot and dry, but even nearby other beds that aren't, you know, they're centered more into the middle of the site.
Yeah, absolutely. So and this property that I bought is just steep downhill. So everything that's flat we put there, right, with terraces. We've got the whole thing integrated into, you know, terrace, swale, pond system. And so, yes, some of the beds that are up close to like some of my access roads, which are a lot of them are just rough rock roads. And they're all raised beds. We just use cedar that we thin for the boundaries of these beds, and they're all raised up. The problem is that I'm like I said, Mecca in the desert, and that desert is on the edge of the rainforest. It's like 110 inches of rain a year. So it is, the amount of slugs is next level. We've gotten pretty good at it. The little yeast traps are just destroy them. And if we can get back into ducks, but yes, yeah. The ones, another problem is that rocks are extremely expensive here because it's all clay. I've dug 40 foot down into the ground building ponds, and I've never once found a natural rock on the property anywhere. It's all clay, and it's been this level of it's, you know, so I got to bring them in, and that's expensive. But yes, wherever it's a bad place for slugs to be is usually a good place to grow your greens. That's a good tactic.
Sand might work, actually. Some more sand, like a sand fringe around something, which is cheaper than the rocks, some local sand. I don't know if you have much of that. We have a lot of sand in Maine, and I'm on granite bedrock mostly. I like really, really enjoy my old pasture site, which is the one spot on my land. Big thanks to cows. It's like 200-year-old pasture land, and everything on that grows just amazing, all on its own. Really keeps regenerative, and you can tell the difference with it. So big thanks to cows and cow poop. Just wanted to throw that out there. I love the fungal colony. I don't know how you say, richness to it that I get, even for the quality on the terps and taste into my heavily local cow poop, you know, pretty good percentage, probably 20-30%. My hemp field's probably half, 50% neighbors' cow poop, organic, and go from there. 3 seasons now, and it does great.
Does your biomass ever hit for bacterial? Like, have you ever tested your biomass for like microbial infection? Like, do you ever see bacterial hits?
Super healthy field in terms of just what I see anyway, visually. Right. And I have been running some tests this year into soil, obviously tests on the medicine and the plant matter itself. I haven't seen any flags pop up or dug deep into having further testing into the biomass, though the leftovers or other stuff goes right to the compost. You know, with that pretty quickly and yeah, super healthy, Mark.
Yeah,
On the cow poop and natural.
The reason why I ask is, in particular, all the Amish around here use a lot of manure in their hemp farming. Yet their COAs, they're getting hit for just total. It's not E. coli. It's just, I don't know. I think it's just total bacteria or something like this.
Total aerobic.
Is it like enterobacteria?
Total aerobic. Exactly what Mike said. Totally aerobic. And what they come back to me is they say, well, you know, what does this mean? And so my interpretation of that, and Mike, tell me if I'm correct on this, is that they're doing
total aerobic includes lactobacillus.
Yeah, but I don't think they're streaking plates. So I believe what they're doing is they do some sort of genetic analysis, and that determines that there was DNA of this bacteria on this biomass at one time. But now the biomass is ground and dried, and it's totally fine and totally okay to process. But these guys are all like, well, wait a second, it's got all this microbial, and the numbers are like in the hundreds of thousands of colony forming units. So they don't exactly know how to interpret that data. So
I would say, I don't know, you know more, but my field is pretty dry. And when you kind of mentioned maybe like the dry out for it, for the bacteria die off perhaps. And if you're going to keep it, well, I know that like wet and moist, you're going to harbor environment, at least set it up for your fungal and your bacteria to thrive. So my field's pretty dusty dry. Part of why I did that is it's on top of bedrock. So, you know, it's whatever loam I could scrape up after clear cut and mix, you know, kind of 50-50 with the cow poop. But my cow poop was aged. When I went in on that stuff, it was at least 1 year, even 2. Some of it was 2+ years old coming into now for, you know, at least. So also broke down aged, sawdust in on it, a lot of straw, local straw and sawdust in.
It's not cow poop anymore.
Well, you got to realize that the same bacteria that's in compost is also going to be ubiquitous within your field. It's going to be being blown around on the air currents and moved around by the wind and the rain. So ultimately, the same lactobacillus that's coming out of helping the milk turn into cheese is also going to be ubiquitously found on your plant material in the field, as well as during the drying process. During the drying process should inhibit the mold, as long as it's done in ideally a cool and dry environment. But generally speaking, what's going to happen is those microbes are going to form spores. Those spores are then capable of being grown when they're in a suitable environment. So oftentimes people aren't drying the plants fast enough, or you're getting that microbial degradation that we were talking about earlier with hydroxylation happening either in the field. You know, the wine industry, they call that noble rot, right? They actually make sweet wines because it increases the sugar content in beer.
Exactly.
There's some hydroxylation that I'm sure is going on when we have early rains in the cannabis industry that may be forming interesting cannabinoids that we're only now being able to detect with the high accuracy HPLC.
Yeah, hey Mike, it's just hydroxylation. There's no is in there. So hydroxylation.
Thank you, Mark.
Okay.
Yeah, well, and I think that, you know, as long as it's in that biomass form, you're probably going to have that mold, then that chance of microbial growth and degradation. So the sooner that people can either turn it into hash or turn it into extracts, the less degradation of the cannabinoids and terpenes that you're going to have. So, but yeah, it's, you know, ultimately it's something that the Washington state had a zero tolerance on all aerobic bacteria the first 2 years, which was tough for a lot of the organic farmers because they wouldn't pass, and they would then have to grow cannabis organically and then process it through some sort of extraction that filters out any of that microbial content.
Well, yeah, there's no microbial content. They're just measuring DNA of microbes that lived on the plant material during the harvest. And that, isn't, if you're doing some kind of
it depends on the lab.
solvent extraction, there's no,
No,
there's
yeah,
no, yeah.
Most of the labs though in state labs will just do the plating. I'd say the minority of the labs are actually doing the DNA sequencing. DNA sequencing is probably more suitable because then you can actually identify, rather than identify whether it's a good or bad. You want to be able to identify if it's a harmful bacteria or a bacteria that produces those mycotoxins.
Exactly.
Those total aerobic, it's going to negatively affect a lot of the terroir because you're not, those microbes that create those terpene precursors in the root systems are going to be essentially have to be scrubbed out of the industry. Otherwise, they'll naturally show up in these total aerobic plates. Now, Washington in the first 2 years of legalization took a conservative approach, put a zero tolerance. I believe Oregon didn't require microbial testing the first year or two, and then did, but they set a kind of a lower bar and a really, really tight bar on pesticides. So what ended up happening with Washington is they didn't require a lot of testing, and then slowly started requiring more and more testing. So
it's required everywhere. I mean, 18, I know it's required in California, right? It's required everywhere now.
Colorado is just came on board or is about to, maybe hasn't even on pesticide
I
testing.
can't think of a regulated market that doesn't require it.
Colorado, or it just happened.
Yeah. And Washington didn't require it. It's just they say that they will test random samples, and if you fail, you'll get a recall or something like that.
Yeah. Well, California is interesting because California has a remediation pathway. So if stuff fails, it can be remediated and still be in the metric system, the tag system or whatever. So that's kind of a little weird, but anyway.
Well, here's the thing with that, and I hate to say that it's a good way to save the farmer's crop, right? Because of what I've seen happen in some parts of the country that are close to orchards or close to vineyards, you're getting crop drift and you're failing for crop pesticides that you didn't yourself spray for it. Other cases, right. It may be accumulated from the soil.
Future 4,200, readership, right? All those folks who were able to save all that distillate by doing a fluorosil chromatography or whatever it was that they did to get rid of the Eagle 20, right?
A sand scrub.
Well, I'm sorry, what is it?
Yeah, a scrub it with sand, right? Silica, it's just a sand.
So it was a sand scrub. Hey, you could sell that. That's like a catchy tagline, right? For a business, right?
Will you write my jingle
Carbon
too?
Chemistries, right, Dustin? Go to Carbon, right? They want to sell stuff to the industry, so.
I'm sure there's going to be patents that get developed out of it, but ultimately, I do think that part of what's called media bed filtration is used.
Right.
I used it prior to getting into the cannabis industry when I was working in the biofuel industry, and they.
Well, y'all know in our industry, Murphy Murray, right? You know Murphy, who does her CRC classes in Mass, and I first met her on the Adam Dunn show. I always thought there was something, kind of interesting going on there. But it's very interesting to use that as a sort of like a widespread technique, no matter whether your stuff's contaminated or not, to just get a more pure fraction. But I always thought that for the most part, you want to get as full spectrum of an extract as you possibly can. So fractionating it into these very nice looking product has its place, but not
and so
products.
If I've been in her personal lab, and she has taken that to full circle back around to the highest level. So not only does she have like a 6-foot chroma column that she uses, a separation column that again she fills with dirt, right? Sand and dirt, basically, like you said, and then she also has a very nice hydrocarbon falling film, which allows her to selectively change the temperature off which fraction she takes.
Which she's recovering, yeah.
she then takes all of the choice fractions and blends them back together, right? And it allows her to separate out parts that you wouldn't want to probably smoke. Exactly, not at, definitely not at scale. So it's a very interesting what she's done. She's been isolating lately esters. She found she's got a jar full of it, and it's crystallizing on its own, and it smells like bananas. It's the craziest thing. That was the first thing she showed me when I was in there. She also has lots of blue crystals growing, blue terpene crystals growing.
Isoamyl acetate, isn't that the banana ester?
I'm not sure what it is.
I'm not looking online. I'm just remembering off the top of my head. Isoamyl acetate. Somebody check me on that.
Getting these things tested is a bit tricky and or very expensive, right? Like your normal cannabis lab's not going to be able to tell you what your ester is. They might be able to get you around the right path, but
back to Marcus's terminology that all these things are kind of like sometimes you have to remediate shit because you got pesticides in it and you can't make a sellable product until you remediate. Other times you're looking to not remediate, but you're looking to what you were saying, Dustin, fractionate. And whether you fractionate by, again, that sounds badass to have a thawing film evaporator where you could separate different fractions. That's so cool. I mean, she's in a very good position. I know the guys that she works with to enable her to be able to do that kind of work and R&D.
And really look, when we make water hash, we're fractionating in a sense as well. We're excluding things by particulate size, and we want some things to go through the bag and some things to stay on the other side of the bag, right? We're just taking that further down the line. So it's like, where do you draw the line? And then when we smoke based on the temperature, that's how much of whatever's in there is getting into our lungs, right? We're kind of fractionating it right there too, based on the vapor pressure or the vaporization point of it. So a lot of our interaction, other than just like straight up eating the flower, is some form of us selectively getting down the line past the flower to the active ingredients that we want.
A little bit of isomerization, but a lot of decarboxylation, and that's it. No ring closing acid chemistry bullshit.
I recommend eating a piece of the bud that you're smoking, because it does release a whole like the magic terpene in your mouth. Yes. And then by smoking it, sensation is.
I would definitely be down to like soak a bunch of buds in butter and then bake them for a little while and then eat that. That sounds delicious.
Also, just putting a fresh bud into hot water like a tea. I mean, everyone's heard about it. Yeah. But like, do it. It's insane. Like the terpenes in the water are just like, wow.
Everyone's heard of it here in Canada, especially because that was one of Kirk Toussaud's main arguments when he explained to the judge, as it sits right now, this cannabis is legal. And then if like your grandmother like took it and put it in a tea bag and put it into hot water, now she could face 14 years in prison. And the judge was kind of like, that was it for him. He was just like, yeah, we have to allow extracts. Like there's not going to be any way around it. And just like that, just in BC at first, across Canada, we went from having, no ability to do extracts to kind of overnight, suddenly, extracts were allowed. And then they also redefined the word marijuana, which was like marijuana meant just the plant, the flowers or whatnot. Then the judge was like, no, marijuana, this is how we got extracts to be allowed. He said, marijuana is every component of the plant. So if you have a license and you can have like a pound, then you're allowed to have a pound of any part of the plant. And so that was the game changer here in Canada. So yeah, shout out to
we had always heard about it, being put in your tea, mom's tea, et cetera, et cetera. And so we always used to kind of laugh at the idea because there was never the thought of I'm going to take a fresh bud and put it in this tea and let its terpenes dissolve. We didn't even know what terpenes were in the sense of what we were actually ingesting. And then to think of then just putting a flower in boiling water just seemed antithesis of anything that we were trying to do to quote unquote get us high. But of course, leave it to older generations to know there was something there, and that science has caught up to its understanding about the terpenes and all that actually does come out in the water. So we don't necessarily get that.
The terpenes are certainly soluble, but the cannabinoids are in their acid forms are not particularly water soluble at all, even in hot water.
Correct.
Yet Jamaican grandmothers, have been doing this for a very long time. Like even while they're kind of like harshing on the grandkids for smoking spliffs in the back room when their backs are sore, or previously to that to have like cramps from their periods or whatnot, like there were mothers using this stuff. It was like kind of the ancient medicine.
I've heard those same stories. But what I can't help but wonder is if they could have somehow tested the bud before the grandma made her tea and after she made her tea and dried it and seen what was the difference. I'm curious.
Well, I mean, if I'm getting the terps out of the trikes because the water's so hot, in theory, I'm probably dissolving a lot of the trikes. The cannabinoids may not be soluble in the water, but if I drink all of that water, I'm going to get all those cannabinoids inside of me. Like, what do they float on the top? So they're just floating around there instead of mixed into the thing. If I drink it all and get that top layer down my gut, I'm getting those cannabinoids inside of me for sure.
I'm not so sure about that. Have you actually tested that?
It could definitely stick to the rim of the cup, right? But in theory, if it was on the top, if I boiled it and used a straw and sucked it up, or just put my lips down on the top of the cup, right, and sucked it out of the top.
Well, wait
I'm
a
gonna
second.
get them on my lips.
What's the compelling nature? I mean, so if you're just putting cannabis into a tea bag and you drop the tea bag into hot water, like Sam said, the cannabinoids aren't going to be soluble. Very slightly.
It depends on how long you leave it in the hot water for. It depends on how tenacious you are, I guess.
Is this boiling water?
Exactly. Yeah, if you're above or below the melting point of the cannabinoids, they should melt. The terpenes are going to help co-solvate the trichromes, but it's going to form a biofilm on the surface.
Right. Who's going to drink boiling hot water?
Well, you let it cool down. The cannabinoids are still going to be there, right? The cannabinoids aren't going back to the flower when it cools down.
They're just going to leave a sticky film all over the place, right?
The point is, they're not going to be on the bud anymore, is my argument.
Yeah.
So utilizing an animal milk like is used in Bang, that's a homogenized.
Now that's different. It's got a
do it in milk. Now you're winning.
Yeah.
Guys, I've been prescribing tea to my patients for a really long time. Just putting flowers in tea, and you can ask all them. It definitely works.
And also,
it definitely
we're not saying does it work. I've heard it from many people that it works. What I'm saying is, what percentage of the active ingredient is being delivered to the patient, and what percent is left in the plant? That was my only question.
Good question.
We have enough scientists here that can actually just boil some cannabis and figure out what's left. I mean, come on, enough of y'all know how to work. You guys, chromatographs.
You need an emulsify. You need something to emulsify the fats into the water layer. We've talked about this many times. And, this is not anything that's easily done with just plant material and water.
No, you put plant fat.
Yeah, but bubble ash is ice.
Goat butter. Oh, they put the goat butter in there. Trust me, there's a fat in there too.
In prison, they use Reese's peanut butter cups because they have soy lecithin in the peanut butter cup. So they would actually chew up their last bud and then chew it with a peanut butter cup so it would break down because nobody wants to smoke their last bud.
Damn, that's why I was getting paid so much for those peanut butter cups in the Who's Gal there.
But if I can hash from ice water, then I should be able to make hash from hot water where I just agitated the shit out of it and use it to, if I pressure wash with hot water, a bud, a plant.
And I'm curious, how much research have you done on this? For example, I actually took water hash and put it in a tall, large glass container and poured boiling hot water in it to see what would happen. So, I mean, I've been playing around doing this RDT on cannabis a long time. And I'm still curious what I did ask about.
You had lots of starting material to experiment with.
That's for sure. And it was legal to do the work.
So
and divert.
once that beaker cooled down, you could drink it, and that hash is getting inside of you, whether it's soluble in the water or not, right? Unless it's still
No,
in the
it's
beaker.
not very it's not very soluble in the water, but in this particular case, what did happen was the hot water would cause the massive uh, bubble hash to sink down to the bottom of the container, where it would get hotter, and it would bubble back up like a lava lamp. It would spread on the top, cool off, and sink back down again. So what it did is gave me a few hours of mindless fun.
You know, it's kind of more passive medicine, a little bit more homeopathic. You know, I mean, a person that's making ganja tea is probably a farmer. You know, I wouldn't say that someone's going to go to the store in Canada and buy legal Canadian cannabis weed and go home and make ganja tea and heal their ails. I think the idea is that you are living and breathing the medicine. You're smoking it, you're doing ganja tea, you have oils. Everyone knows that oils and those kinds of things dissolve the trichomes. So if you really want to dissolve the trichomes, you might have like the butter and the things like that. But if you make tea, you know, you might, if you really want the medicine, you probably eat the bud afterwards. You don't use a tea bag and then you eat the bud afterwards. Like when you make garden tea, like we have products that are, you know, we don't recommend people using a bag to brew their tea. The water should go in you, along with all the worm castings, and all the herbs should be in your body afterwards.
Yeah, water extraction from a plant is not the same as water extraction from an extract, because the plant has much more lipids present. And if I'm heating those lipids off the plant surface up, and then there's cannabinoids floating around, I've got a little bit of a lipid emulsion going on. You know, that's what winterization is when we're processing. It's all these extra lipids that we extracted that we're trying to get rid of. Those lipids are very cannabis soluble. A lot of people lose a lot of their cannabinoids to that fat cake that they've got because they didn't wash them back out. So you can load those lipids up. So, and that's all coming from the plant. So hot water plant extraction has some tiny percentage of cannabinoids that are becoming soluble just from what's going on with the plant.
No, I agree with this, because when I've interviewed people in traditional cannabis producing countries where men and especially women would make tea, as you're talking about, and they would say, you know, that it gave them this benefit or that benefit or this benefit. And I was just wondering if anybody actually knew how much of the THC and other cannabinoids or terpenes, I imagine most of the terpenes are gone, still remain in the plant material. That's all.
Yeah. So like conventional tea, or what, Camille sinensis or whatever it is, those are all water soluble polyphenols that are actually, the polyphenol portion is the aglycone of a much larger molecule that looks kind of like the anthocyanins. So these are very large water soluble molecules that come out in the tea. I mean, and so that's, you know, cannabinoids aren't aglycones. They're not, they're fat soluble, yeah, stuck in the trichome. You're not going to easily solubilize it in hot water. I always found it interesting though, and Sam, I don't know if you've ever looked at this before. It appears as though there's a good process that uses hot water to do extraction, and almost kind of like, I won't say it's like ice water hashing, but it's hashing in a way using hot water or super pressurized steam or Dustin. I don't know if you know about this at all.
No, I'm not familiar with it. And if you find a reference
I think Dustin's about to tell us about it, but
okay.
They make a pretty high percentage CBDA product from hemp now, and I've seen this coming out of Oregon. Dustin, do you know anything about that?
Well, science is a wonderful thing.
Yeah. Well, this is Hash Church. Holy shit. Let's talk about hash.
Put that lava lamp image back in your mind And then imagine that I can wash, through that lava lamp, I can send a different solvent down that will allow me to grab the hash and leave the water behind. Like typically in like your cooking oil industry, that's going to be hexane. But guys are getting crazy with it. They're like percolating propane through it, so that, the beauty there is that the propane can then be separated from your hash at a very low temperature. So if I'm trying to save all my acids and whatever non-water soluble terpenes that might be left, they're getting crazy with it. So it's just a liquid extraction from this glob that's in your water. And the hot water, the pressure water, that's just to break the trikes off and get it in the mix.
Right. Well, I mean, again, some hybrid of that process to me sounds pretty scalable, but sounds like something that you'd want to have really good regulation around the equipment and the process and the manufacturer. And just like when I look at the size of the tanks at Marcus's facility, I can imagine that process being carried out at that tremendous scale there.
Look, there's
because that makes a very clean product. I was amazed how clean the product is. I didn't know the level of detail about the process that you just described. So thank you.
And there is a few more that are floating around. One of them is like an acidic wash where it's just warm acid and you're just, it's very low. It's not very abrasive, right? And then we can do an acid base crash out from there. Because we're targeting those acidic cannabinoids. That one's got a lot more steps involved. And then the other one is an enzymatic type extraction where it's warm with enzymes, and enzymes are breaking down the trichrome surfaces. And then that's allowing the cannabinoids and the terps and everything in there to come out. And like we said, they pop to the top and then become a lava lamp. And then, if you want to stay truly solventless, there's ways to get the water off without any solvents, but you're leaving a purity step behind when you do that. That may be beneficial or not.
Now, we got to ask, and the rest of the church wants to know from Sam, did you patent the hash lava lamp? I mean, come on. That's like a fucking statement. If you have enough hash to fill a lava lamp, you got lots of hash, right?
Well, but I could have patented it, but to be honest, I was thinking, well, how am I ever going to sell these when cannabis wasn't even legal when I, but yeah, I'm sorry I didn't do it now. It would have made my retirement much more plush.
Dude, I guarantee you this, that most people's hash, it wouldn't work with. Yours worked because of the utter and complete ridiculous quality and purity that you can get it to. But like, I just doubt that every resin would do the same thing.
Dude, yeah, his would have the no green line at the top.
We could use this episode alone just to blow it up. Someone needs to invent the hash lava lamp, man. Come on, Sam.
Well,
there you go. Come on, Sam.
If you have really good, clean water hash, you can easily do it also.
Well, I think it has to be really clean and really good, because I've cleaned some not so good stuff.
Then it will work. I mean, come on, there must be some people with an extra ounce of water hash pollen, dried weight I'm talking about.
Come on, Dustin, some of your tribe has got to be up there.
A couple gallons of boiling water on it.
Oh my God. A couple of good laughs today on Hash Church. I'm not going to lie. I'm going to call a hard stop at 12 p.m. So we have like 3 minutes to wrap it up. We can continue next weekend for sure. But anyone that wants to say more now, this is your chance. And I'll thank you now, Dustin, for coming out. We'll have you back again as well if you want to come share some more. And thank everyone for being on the panel. So let's finish it off here with our last couple of minutes. Say whatever you need to say, guys.
Yeah, great having you here, Dustin. Again, some of your tribe, I joined your future 4200 there. It's a fascinating site. Good shit. But there's got to be some people out there that in your network there that at least should have been piqued by this discussion. And hopefully we'll start to see some prototypes in the coming weeks. Come on, people, you can do this. All the techniques are on Hash Church, right? We've talked about it enough.
Well,
Hey,
there's
I'm a
lot
member
good-
of Future 4200. I
there-
just
there-
noticed
there-
that.
Appreciate you, man.
There's a
Dude.
lot of good information
jumped
up
on
there
there
if you wade through the threads, man, and there's just discussions where you can get lost for hours. I've done that. So thank you, Dustin. Thanks for coming out today, buddy.
There's one about us talking on Hash Church right now that I just found from Farmex,
Oh my
Oregon. That was like the
These
fourth
two
post I
things-
found.
It's meta as fuck.
It was like a picture of Dustin. That's pretty awesome.
I felt like this has been before. This has happened many times.
Well, there's nothing wrong. I would think that there's lots of familiar people in both circles. So, right, Dustin? I mean,
Yeah, absolutely. I think I knew at least 3 of you guys before this. I hung out with the Dragonfly guy in Hawaii last year. Mike, I've met. I think up maybe at Lyft, maybe hanging out with Tim. We've met somewhere before.
You knew Horatio pretty well, didn't you? He was on there.
Yeah, probably half in here. Yeah, Horatio. I did know Horatio pretty well.
Because he mentioned, he talked to you. He talked about you quite a bit. And
Yeah.
I got on there. I've been on your forum and I've read a lot of stuff. But yeah, it was great to see everybody here today. And always thank you for having me. And I hope everybody has a fantastic Sunday. And just keep that positivity going, growing. And I want to challenge you guys all to a solo cup grow. So I want everybody to grow a plant in a solo cup all around the world. So if you have a chance, grab a solo cup and just grow in a solo cup. Keep it in your window, whatever. Just grow solo cup and maybe even pass that on to somebody else and keep them growing their journey. So as always, guys, peace and love. And thanks for having me, Mark, and everybody else on the panel. Awesome. Keep growing.
I feel bad I took my plant out of the solo cup, but it's doing so much better in a bigger pot. Thanks for the animal cookies, Johnny B.
Well, if you want to maintain it as a bonsai, just remember, you just take it out, remove the bottom third, and then put in new soil, and then you can put it back. So it keeps the roots growing. Otherwise, you'll get root lock. Bonsai trick.
I think I must be a new member or something because my shit needs approval on Future 4200. If only I knew the guy that owned the website or something, I could maybe get a little boost on my no, I'm just little juice. Well, thank you everybody for coming and hanging out, and I hope you guys all have a really nice Sunday today. Let's try and do it again next week. I'll send out the emails if you guys want to come back. We'll talk some more, and otherwise may that full melt bless your bowl sooner than later's. Peace out,
Go
everybody.
plant some trees.
Thank you, Marcus.
And
Thanks,
start
Marcus.
incorporating medicinal mushrooms into your diet.
Absolutely.